Thank you for joining us. Aristotle is one of the most important names in the history of philosophy. Along with Socrates and Plato, he became one of the leading personalities of all time. His thought has survived the test of time, reaching the present day and displaying all its splendor. His works continue to be studied, debated, and influential. Like his predecessors Socrates and Plato, Aristotle is a major thinker in the history of philosophy. However, unlike the other two, he was not an Athenian. He was born around 384 BC in Stagira in Thrace, now a city in the Chalcidian region. His father was Nicomachus, a talented and renowned physician who worked for the Macedonian royal family. The famous historian Diogenes Laertius described Aristotle as someone with a whispered speech. His legs were very thin and his eyes small, but he dressed extravagantly and combed his hair carefully. Aristotle grew up in a privileged financial situation. During his childhood and youth, the philosopher from Stagira received a good education, and when he was between 16 and 17 years old, he was sent to Athens to study at the academy with Plato, who was already around 70 years old. He stayed there and studied for almost 20 years, leaving the city only after his master's death. Following Plato's passing, the academy was inherited by his nephew, Speusippus, who placed great emphasis on the teaching of mathematics. Much to Aristotle's chagrin, Aristotle, despite being Plato's disciple, developed a philosophical thought that differed in many ways from that of his master. He was even overly critical of various aspects of Platonic philosophy. These disagreements can be seen in Aristotelian metaphysics, which differed from that of the master of the academy, based on a sensible world and a supersensible world. Another particularity is Aristotle's special interest and attention to the empirical sciences, something we cannot see in Plato's works. Aristotle's legacy is distinguished by major inquiries into nature. The philosopher moved to Atarneus, a Greek colony in Asia Minor. This time was particularly important in Aristotle's life, as he met Pythias, niece of King Hermias of Atarneus, whom he married and had a prosperous relationship with. The philosopher once wrote that, after dying, he would have liked to be buried with his beloved. In 348 BC, he lived for a period in Assos and then in Mytilene, the capital of the island of Lesbos. Aristotle's time there was particularly notable for his intense studies into biology and careful observation of nature. In Lesbos, he eagerly studied marine life, and in Assos, he even opened an academy, where he led research into biology. One of the great landmarks of Aristotle's work is that it pioneered the detailed study and systematic classification of certain species. The philosopher is said to have dissected some animals to study them more thoroughly. He compared and observed life forms in nature in an unprecedented way. His contributions were so important that today it is difficult, and even unfair, to talk about the history of science without mentioning Aristotle. In 343 BC, Aristotle was called to join the court of King Philip II of Macedon, becoming tutor to the 13-year-old Alexander, the king's son, who would one day become Alexander the Great, one of the most famous figures in history. Plutarch tells us that, at least for a certain period, the young Alexander became attached to the philosopher tutor and had a profound respect for him. Viewing him as a true father, Aristotle taught the young heir to the Macedon throne various subjects, and his instructions were extremely important in Alexander's life. The philosopher held this position for 3 years and then returned to his hometown of Stagira, where he lived from 340 to 335 BC, eventually moving to Athens and lived there until 323 BC. In 335 BC, on the outskirts of Athens, Aristotle founded the philosophical school called Lyceum, named after the word Lykios, because the school was in an area dedicated to Apollo, known as Lykios or Lyceum. Aristotle had many students and debated different areas of knowledge with them. Some notable personalities studied with him, including the philosophers Aristoxenus of Tarentum, Critolus, Strato of Lampsacus, and many others. The Lyceum became known as the Peripatetic School, and its students came to be called Peripatetics. The word peripatetic comes from Greek and can be translated as strolling or walking. The origin lies in the fact that Aristotle's classes took place during garden walks, during which he and his students engaged in philosophical reflections and debates. In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died. This sparked an anti-Macedonian reaction among the Athenians, and accusations were leveled against Aristotle, Alexander's former tutor. For safety reasons, the philosopher left the city and moved to Chalcis, on the Greek island of Euboea. Aristotle said that he had left Athens to not let philosophy be wronged twice. clearly referring to Socrates' fate, another notable Greek philosopher, whose practice was rejected by some of his contemporaries who accused, condemned, and killed him. The archaeological discovery of the Lyceum is recent, having taken place in 1996. The site was accidentally found in the center of Athens, just behind the Greek Parliament, during excavations to build a modern art museum. Since 2009, the Lyceum has been available to the public. It opens every day and charges a small fee to visitors. When we study this great Greek philosopher, we find a division in his writings, made in antiquity by some scholars who considered that Aristotle produced texts especially to be read by the public, the so-called exoteric writings, and also technical texts, known as esoteric writings, prepared by the philosopher for use in the Lyceum. Unfortunately, almost all of the contents of the first category have been lost over time, although many of his vast productions have come down to us. During the Middle Ages, philosophers once again focused on Aristotelianism. During the so-called Islamic philosophy or Arab philosophy, one of the leading figures in Arabic philosophy, who shaped the entire context of medieval philosophy, was Averroes, a notable Muslim philosopher and physician. He was a great scholar of Aristotle's philosophy. His annotations on the Greek thinker's work helped to awaken interest in Aristotelian thought in the Middle Ages. We can also mention Al-Ghazali and Avicenna, outstanding Arab philosophical personalities who were also inspired by Aristotle's studies. Apart from the influence and visibility that Aristotelian philosophy had at that time, his work lived on after this historical period, inspiring great personalities, including two illustrious men, the Polish Nicholas Copernicus and the Italian Galileo Galilei. The latter disagreed with and challenged Aristotelian physics. Besides these two renowned personalities, Darwin wrote the following words: "Linnaeus and Cuvier have been my two gods, though in very different ways, but they were mere schoolboys to old Aristotle." In his writings, Aristotle addresses multiple areas of study, such as metaphysics, ethics, politics, logic, zoology, mathematics, art, among others. In general, through his documents and their vast thematic scope, the philosopher ended up contributing to many areas of knowledge beyond philosophy. In 2016, during the 2,400 Years of Aristotle World Congress, a group of Greek archaeologists claimed to have found Aristotle's tomb in Stagira, the place where the thinker was born. Although without any definitive proof, the evidence was strong and the team seemed confident of their discovery. The site where the archaeologists said they had found the tomb contains descriptions similar to the information found in some official documents that mention the death and burial of Aristotle's ashes. The evidence found in the excavations is powerful proof that this was the thinker's tomb, but it is not yet certain whether this was the illustrious philosopher's final resting place or not. Aristotle was one of the world's most famous thinkers, and his philosophical legacy still fascinates and attracts the attention of many. He remains a highly respected personality, whose work is of enormous significance to the history of philosophy. Aristotle is a Promethean figure in the history of the world who lived between 384 to 322 BC. He is considered the father of logic, biology, political science, zoology, embryology, natural law, scientific method, rhetoric, psychology, realism, and even meteorology. He was first a student of Plato. Then, when Plato retired, he left the academy which Plato founded and became the tutor of Alexander the Great and the other two future kings, Ptolemy and Cassander. He established a library in the Lyceum which helped him to produce many of his hundreds of books on papyrus scrolls. Unfortunately, only a third of his magnificent work has survived. For example, the treatises Physics, Metaphysics, Nicomachean Ethics, Politics, On the Soul, and Poetics have influenced more than 2 millennia of scientists and theologians alike, both fascinated by his ideas. Being the founder of so many disciplines and having such a tumultuous life living in the company of great kings, Aristotle has many life lessons to offer us. So with that in mind, in this video, we bring you 7 life lessons from Aristotle. 1. Don't run away from your problems. Aristotle says, to run away from trouble is a form of cowardice, and while it is true that the suicide braves death, he does it not for some noble object, but to escape some ill. It's easy to be optimistic when everything in our lives goes well, but it's much harder when we're faced with problems or even tragedies. It's important to focus on the solution if you can fix the problem, or if you can't fix it, it's important to focus on how to accept it. If you just focus on the problem itself, It's very easy to get stuck in a circle of negative thinking and become anxious and depressed. But most importantly, you don't have to be alone in solving your problems. It's important to ask your family and friends for help. 2. Always tell the truth. Aristotle says, to be truthful is to be honest in word and deed. Telling the truth is a virtue, one of the best traits that you can have as a human being. When you are truthful, people will trust you and help you build healthy relationships, and you will develop a good reputation among them. Sometimes it will be hard, but you will gain their respect and become a trustworthy person. 3. Learn from your mistakes. Aristotle says, I count him braver who overcomes his desires than him who conquers his enemies. For the hardest victory is the victory over self. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them. It's easy to fall into a pattern of blaming others for our failures. Instead, we should take responsibility for our actions and find ways to do better in the future. 4. Be open to learning. Aristotle says, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Learning is a lifelong process. The more you learn, the more you realize there is so much you don't know. Be open to new ideas and experiences. Be willing to learn from others, even if they have different perspectives. This will help you grow as a person and become more knowledgeable and wise. 5. Find balance in life. Aristotle says, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Life is all about balance. Too much of anything is not good. Find balance in your work, relationships, and personal time. This will help you lead a more fulfilling and happy life. 6. Value your friendships. Aristotle says, friendship is a single soul dwelling in two bodies. True friendships are valuable and rare. They provide support, encouragement, and companionship. Value your friendships and invest time and effort into maintaining them. Good friends will enrich your life and help you through difficult times. 7. Live a virtuous life. Aristotle says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Living a virtuous life means developing good habits and practicing them consistently. Strive to be the best version of yourself. Practice kindness, honesty, and integrity. This will help you lead a meaningful and fulfilling life. In conclusion, Aristotle's teachings are timeless and can help us navigate the complexities of life. By following these 7 life lessons, we can strive to be better individuals and live a more fulfilling and meaningful life. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. See you in the next video.